My name's Darren Cole, and for over a decade, I thought I had something solid. Unbreakable. Jenna and I had been together since we were teenagers, 18, to be exact. We built everything from scratch, a home, a rhythm, a life that looked exactly like what we'd dreamed about back in high school. Our two kids, Ezra and Maya, brought that beautiful kind of chaos that makes the house feel alive. My job wasn't anything flashy. I worked as a territory manager for a landscaping supply company, but it paid well and kept things steady. That let Jenna pour her energy into raising the kids and working her photography gigs here and there. We had our rituals. Friday nights meant takeout and old movies, Saturday mornings we'd all walk to the lake, and Sunday mornings were pancake madness. I truly believed we were in a good place. I really did. I thought I was safe. But that illusion snapped clean in half one Thursday evening. I remember every damn detail. Jenna was standing by the kitchen island when I came in, arms folded, her phone clutched like it was loaded. I had just gotten back from checking out a client site, covered in dirt and sweat, bone-tired, looking forward to a hot shower and some hugs from the kids. But the moment I saw her face, I knew something was off. Her eyes were locked on mine, cold and unreadable. "We need to talk," she said. Her voice was steady. Too steady. I let out a breath, half-laughed, wiping my face with the sleeve of my shirt. "Can this wait till I wash off this 12-hour day?" "No," she said flatly. "Who is she, Darren?" I actually chuckled. I thought it was some kind of mix-up, completely out of left field. "Who's who?" She didn't even flinch. Just tapped her screen and flipped it toward me. The screen lit up with a thread of texts. My name, and another woman's, Layla. That kind of stuff, dirty, explicit, way too personal, that's just not me. I said it right away. "Jenna, come on, you know that's not how I talk. You really believe this crap?" I pointed at the screen, trying to get her to look at how off it all felt. "I don't even text like that. Look at the spelling, the way it's written, it's not me." But she wasn't hearing any of it. She was busy doing something else. That's when I noticed her other hand, half hidden behind her, holding another phone. Little red light blinking. My stomach flipped. "Wait, are you recording me right now?" I asked, barely getting the words out. She didn't say a word, just gave me this cold, measured stare. Then she said, "So you're denying sleeping with Lila Foster?" Lila Foster? I had no idea who that even was. The name meant nothing to me. I just stood there like an idiot, blinking at her, waiting for her to crack a smile or laugh, waiting for her to say it was all a twisted prank or something. But no. She didn't even flinch. She just nodded to herself like she'd gotten what she came for, stopped the recording, and brushed past me without another word. By that evening, I was out. Just like that. I didn't even get a chance to pack properly. She'd already called her cousin, Nia, to come help escort me out. That word still stings. I ended up crashing in my truck, parked under a dim street lamp behind a laundromat. 2 nights I spent in that seat, too numb to reach out, too pissed off to cry. I kept texting Jenna, again and again, trying to understand where this came from, asking, begging, really, to let me say something to the kids. Nothing. No reply. Just silence. Then, 2 days in, I was half asleep in the driver's seat, parked outside a convenience store, when someone tapped on my window. I jolted up, heart racing. It was a guy in a navy suit, holding a folder. He didn't say much, just handed it to me and walked off. Inside was a restraining order. Filed by Jenna Cole. She claimed I was unstable. Claimed she had proof that I might be a danger. I wasn't even allowed near the house. 100 feet, that was the line I couldn't cross. No calls, no messages. Nothing. That whole weekend, I was locked out of my own life. Then my sister called. "Rachel's telling everyone you cheated," she said, her voice all tight like she'd been holding it in. She sent screenshots, to the whole family group chat. I froze. "Screenshots of what?" I asked, my voice catching halfway through. I already knew I hadn't done anything, but the way she hesitated, it cut deep. "They look real, Eli. Like, really real." I just sat there, parked behind an old gas station with my phone glued to my ear, barely breathing. It wasn't just Rachel anymore. It was everyone. She was spreading it fast, planting seeds before I could even find my footing. And I was already playing catch-up. A few days later, my manager called me into a meeting with HR. The second I walked in, I could tell it wasn't going to end well. He couldn't even look at me. Just kept fidgeting with a pen. "Eli, listen," he started, slow and awkward. "I know this is personal, but there's been talk. Some rumors about domestic stuff." "Rumors?" I asked, barely able to get the word out. "Some of the board members are uncomfortable," he said. "We're going to have to let you go, for now, at least." "For now?" I repeated, like maybe if I said it back, it would make sense. But I knew what it meant. He sighed and said, "It's not personal. We just can't afford the risk." And that was it. Just like that, everything I'd poured myself into, gone. I walked out of that office like a ghost. The only person who stepped up was Jaden, my best friend since 7th grade. He didn't even hesitate, but his offer came with a catch. His wife didn't want me in the guest room. So I ended up in the garage. No heat. No insulation. Just a metal cot, a dusty mini fridge, and the kind of silence that hums in your ears after the world stops making sense. I'd lie there staring up at the beams every night, asking myself over and over, what did I miss? When did Rachel decide I was the enemy? Was I too focused on work? Too naive? Or just too stupid to see the truth unraveling right in front of me? The part that cut the deepest was trying to talk to Mason and Lily. The court arranged this stiff, 2-hour supervised visit at some cold-looking family center downtown. Felt more like a dentist's office than a place to see your own kids. The caseworker sat in the corner, arms crossed, eyes glued to us like she expected me to flip the table or throw a toy across the room. Lily barely even glanced at me. Mason had his eyes glued to his handheld console the whole time, thumb tapping like it was the only thing keeping him grounded. I got down on one knee in front of them, hands shaking, heart pounding, trying to piece together a sentence that didn't sound like begging. Hey, Daddy didn't do what people are saying. I love you. I'll always love you. Lily finally looked up and whispered, "Then why don't you live with us anymore?" And I had nothing. Nothing I could say that would make sense to a 10-year-old. I nodded slowly, fighting back the lump in my throat. When the visit was over, the caseworker gently guided them out of the room, and I just stood there, frozen, watching my own kids walk away like I was a stranger they'd only just met. That was the moment it all landed. Not just the heartbreak. Not just the betrayal. It was the theft. Paige didn't just lie, she took everything we built. Ripped it from under me and locked the door behind her. We'd had 12 years together. 12 years of tiny traditions, worn-in routines, sleepy mornings with warm coffee and forehead kisses, giggles under blankets, and whispered promises after lights out. And she tossed it all like it was garbage. Like none of it had ever mattered. But it mattered to me. Every single second of it. And I wasn't about to let her be the one who got to decide how our story ends. I used to believe that if you did right by people, showed up, worked hard, stayed honest, that the truth would carry you. That was the kind of man I tried to be. Reliable. Steady. Family first. But courtrooms don't care about truth. They care about what can be proven. And right now, I was standing in a world where lies moved faster than facts, and my whole life was on the other side of glass I couldn't break. Court doesn't care about what's real. It cares about who can cry on cue, who spins the better sob story, who turns make-believe into something that sounds believable. And Paige wasn't my wife anymore, she was a strategist. Cold. Calculated. Focused on the win. The second that envelope landed in my hands with "petition for full custody" stamped across it, I knew exactly what she was aiming for, my throat. But still, part of me held on to this stupid, dying hope that she wouldn't drag the kids into it. Not Paige. Not the woman who used to slip "I love you" notes into my lunch or call me in tears when Lily so much as scraped her elbow. I thought maybe, just maybe, it was just pressure. Just a scare tactic to get me to fold and sign quick. But I was dead wrong. Her affidavit tore me to shreds. She wrote that I was emotionally checked out. That I didn't bond with the kids. That I'd hole up in the garage after work and barely say a word to anyone. She said I spoke to them harshly, that they were afraid to talk around me. Paige made it sound like I was some looming shadow in their lives. Then she took it a step further, claimed I had a gambling issue. Said I was the reason our finances had started to slip. That hit me like a gut punch. But the cherry on top? She dragged in our neighbor, Carla Morales. Yeah, that Carla, the one who left handwritten notes about our porch light being too bright, and once filed a complaint over our trash cans being a foot too far from the curb. Paige listed her as a witness. Said she saw me bringing strange women into the house while Paige was away. When I read that part, I actually laughed. Out loud. A real, bitter laugh. Then I almost launched those damn papers across the garage. Carla had hated me since the day we moved into Oak Bend. Of course she backed Paige. That woman probably dreamed of the day she could throw dirt on my name. But laughing didn't change a thing. Not in court. In there, Paige wore the perfect mask, heartbroken, brave, mother of the year. And me? I looked like every horror story you see at the bottom of the news ticker. The hearing was quick and ruthless. Paige sat across from me with her lawyer, Evan Dorsey, one of those guys who looked like he practiced smirking in the mirror before walking into court. He had that too-slick suit, that forced charm. He painted me as some unstable mess of a man, unpredictable, emotionally erratic, someone who posed a risk to his own kids. And I couldn't say a word. I had to sit there, silent, while a complete stranger rewrote my story like he knew me, while the judge barely even looked up from her notes. Paige turned on the waterworks right on cue. Spoke with that soft, almost innocent tone. Wore a plain sweater, no makeup. She called me Noah, like we were still on speaking terms, like we were just old friends trying to work things out. She told the judge, he was a wonderful father, Your Honor, but something in him changed. Then she submitted fake screenshots, pages from gambling websites, a spreadsheet full of made-up losses. I opened my mouth to push back, to at least say something, but my public defender reached over and squeezed my arm. Just whispered, not now. Let it go. Let it go? How do you let it go when someone's burning your whole life down right in front of you? That was the day everything slipped through my hands. The judge handed Paige temporary full custody, let her stay in the house, and slapped a no-contact clause on me. Said all communication had to go through attorneys. The restraining order? Still active. And a couple weeks later, things went from bad to worse. No meeting this time. No explanation. Just an email from HR, due to recent legal proceedings, we are terminating your employment effective immediately. No phone call. No warning. Just like that, I was out. I found out later someone had passed along the transcript from the custody hearing straight to my regional manager. Guess that was enough for them to cut the cord. I knew Harper hadn't pulled the trigger herself, she was too calculated for that. But someone had done it for her. Someone had made damn sure I was locked out of everything, and they'd pulled it off flawlessly. I still remember standing outside Levi's place, phone in my hand, staring at that email like it was gibberish. My whole career, gone. Not because of proof. Not because I actually did something wrong. Just a story. A sob story with just enough dirt to stick. I walked back into the garage, shut the door behind me, and dropped onto the cot. Just sat there, empty. Levi came out a minute later with a beer in each hand. "Wanna talk?" he asked. I shook my head. Talking won't change any of it. He didn't push. Just cracked his own bottle open and sat next to me without saying another word. That's the kind of friend he was. Didn't need to fill the silence, just stayed there with me while I tried to breathe through it. And for the first time since this all started unraveling, I didn't force a conversation to distract myself. I just let the quiet wrap around me. But even then, I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd already disappeared. Like I was watching my own life from the outside. Everything I built, all of it, was now being used to crush me. The home I worked for, the job I gave everything to, my own children, even my damn name. Harper twisted it all into something poisonous. Turned me into this villain. Someone I didn't even recognize anymore. I pulled up the old photos on my phone, the ones I hadn't had the nerve to delete yet. Rowan at the aquarium, gripping my hand with that giant grin. Eli knocked out cold in my lap after a Pixar movie. Harper, covered in flour, singing along to Whitney Houston while dancing barefoot across our kitchen floor. And I kept asking myself, was any of it ever real? Or had she been performing the whole time? Had I said something, done something to push her to this? Or had she always been capable of it, and I just refused to see it? Maybe it didn't even matter anymore. All I knew was the life I thought I had was gone, and I was the one left holding the ashes. Everything had fallen apart. The walls I'd spent years building were gone, and all I had left was the mess they left behind. But even in that wreckage, something inside me refused to give in. Just this stubborn pulse, this tight, gritty thing in my chest that kept repeating, this isn't how it ends. Harper may have knocked the foundation out from under me. She may have taken the first swing and landed it clean. But the house? That wasn't me. Losing the job didn't mean I stopped being a father. And whatever happened in that courtroom, that wasn't the final word. She took what I had, but I'd build again. And this time, I'd build something she couldn't set on fire. People think rock bottom hits like a crash. It doesn't. It drips in, slow, quiet, steady. I used to think losing the house, the job, and my kids all at once was it. That was as far as I could fall. But the real bottom? It's waking up on a beat-up cot in someone else's freezing garage, where you can literally see your breath in the air. It's grabbing your phone every morning out of habit, knowing there's nothing waiting on the other side of the screen. It's realizing you've been scrubbed out of your kids' everyday lives, like you were just a stain on their picture frame someone finally wiped away. Those first few weeks after the court's decision, they were a haze. Just cold mornings, cheap instant coffee, court notices, and dead-end job leads. I took whatever came my way, hauling crates at a shipping dock, tearing up weeds in yards that weren't mine, lifting furniture for people who barely made eye contact, let alone offered a thank you. My back ached from the last gig, but I didn't stop. I couldn't. Pride had already left the moment Harper changed the locks. Money was barely trickling in. I tracked every dollar like it might vanish if I blinked too long. I held on to receipts like they were evidence in a trial, because in a way, they were. Most days, I lived off whatever I could get for a couple bucks: instant noodles, canned chili, those sad little sandwiches from the gas station that tasted like cardboard and regret. One night, Logan offered to float me for a few days. Said it casually, like it was no big deal. But I couldn't take it. I was already sleeping in his garage. I wasn't about to start digging into his wallet too. Pride doesn't die all at once. It just frays, thread by thread. The only thing that gave me any reason to get up in the morning were the court-approved visits with Riley and Mason. And even those were doled out like some kind of ration mercy, just 2 visits in half a year. But I remember every second of those hours like they were stamped into my brain. Riley was taller. Mason had lost his front teeth. They looked older, and not just in size, older in that way where you can tell they'd been taught to keep some distance. They didn't run to me. They didn't shout "Dad," like they used to. Instead, they sat across from me at this plastic jungle-themed table, stiff and careful, like I was a stranger with a familiar name. A social worker sat nearby, pretending not to eavesdrop while scribbling on her clipboard. I'd brought them small things, trying to bridge the gap with memories. A puzzle Mason used to love, a sketchpad for Riley. They thanked me, but their eyes didn't light up. They were guarded, like someone had warned them not to get too close. "Mom says you're sick," Mason whispered once, barely loud enough for me to catch it. Something inside me splintered. "Sick?" I asked, trying not to sound shaken. He nodded and added, "She said, you don't know how to love us." I swallowed hard, and it felt like glass. "That's not true, buddy. I love you more than anything." But he didn't answer. Just kept coloring, slow and quiet. Riley didn't speak the rest of the time either. When I walked out of that visitation center, my fists were clenched so tight my nails left little crescents in my palms. My jaw was locked. I didn't cry, I couldn't. I just walked until I couldn't feel anything anymore. I gave myself a pounding headache just trying to think through it all. It wasn't just that Leah was keeping the kids from me, she was reshaping me in their heads, turning me into someone unrecognizable. And the worst part? I had no idea how to stop her. I tried to fight back. Scraped together whatever cash I could to get legal help. Technically, it was a public defender, but even that felt like a stretch. He'd stroll into the hearings late, barely glance at the file like he was cramming for a test he forgot he had, and once, God help me, he actually called me Ryan in front of the judge. Meanwhile, her lawyer, Malcolm Grant, tore into me like it was a game he knew he'd already won. He had this smug, polished air, every word felt rehearsed and sharp. He twisted every hiccup on my part into proof of some moral defect. A missed deadline? Irresponsible. Showing emotion? Manipulative. The guy was a snake in a $1,000 suit, and he knew exactly how to strike. Leah played her role to perfection. Sat there in soft cardigans with her hair tucked neatly behind her ears, always teary at the right moments. The court ate it up. Every time she spoke about healing from the emotional scars I'd left behind, about how the kids were in recovery, I could feel the judgment tightening around my neck. I wanted to yell that it wasn't true, but yelling would have just handed them more ammo. So I did the one thing I could without a court order. I started therapy. Not for show, not because anyone made me, but because I felt like I was sinking and had no one left to call. Found a clinic on the east side that charged based on income. First session, I sat across from Dr. Heller and didn't say a damn thing for almost 10 minutes. I just stared at this half-dead fern by the window and locked my jaw to keep from breaking down. When I finally opened my mouth, the words came out like a whisper. I don't know who I am anymore. Everything I built, it's just gone. She didn't hand me a tissue or toss out some empty line. She just gave a slow nod and said, "Then let's figure out who you are now." And for the first time in a long while, that didn't sound impossible. I started writing. Journaling, really. Letters to Elena and Noah that I'd never send. I poured everything into those pages, my anger, the helplessness, all the things I couldn't say out loud. My notebooks became a record of every moment I couldn't get back, every slight, every silence. It didn't change anything, but it gave me a way to hold onto the pieces of myself I hadn't completely lost. At night, when the weight of everything was too much, I'd drive to a park on the edge of town, find the old, deserted basketball court, and hit the punching bag. I'd hang from the hoop, fists aching, my arms burning, unsure if I was training or just desperate to feel something other than this crushing emptiness. The one thing I always carried with me, wherever I went, was a photo of the kids. It was from a sunny Saturday at the zoo, just a few months before everything fell apart. Elena had cotton candy on her cheek, and Noah was in his T-Rex hoodie. That photo? Camille had taken it. That bitter irony didn't escape me. Sometimes, when everything felt too heavy to bear, I'd pull it out and just whisper to myself, "Survive, just survive." I wasn't sure how, or even why I said it anymore, but it was the only thing I could hold on to. I didn't have a clear plan for the future, but I wasn't about to let this broken, erased version of myself, this quiet, forgotten version, be the one they remembered. Not if I could help it. It happened on a Tuesday, of all days. There was nothing extraordinary about it, just heat, sweat, and that familiar ache from a job that never paid enough and drained too much. I'd been working landscaping for a condo complex, trimming hedges under that humid sun. By the end of the day, my shirt was drenched, my knees were sore, and my knuckles were scraped raw. When the job ended, I stopped by the corner store to grab a bottle of Gatorade. As I stood in line, my eyes caught the scratch-offs and lotto slips near the counter. Without thinking, I grabbed one, just a quick pick. It had become a habit over the years, a quiet superstition I clung to, a reminder of better times. I handed the clerk a crumpled $20 bill, and without much thought, he passed me the ticket. I barely glanced at it before shoving it into my wallet. I took the receipt, walked back to Tarek's garage, showered with the hose in the yard, ate some leftover pasta, and collapsed into bed early, the hum of the fan lulling me to sleep. I didn't think about that ticket again until days later when I was clearing out my wallet, tossing receipts and old gas station punch cards. That's when I saw it again. The corner of the ticket was bent, and the numbers were barely legible. On a whim, I pulled it out, sat down on the cot, and checked the numbers online. 6, 13, 25, 38, 42 and the Powerball, 11. I blinked, looked again, and checked a second site. Same numbers. I sat there for what felt like an eternity, unable to move. For 10 full minutes, all I could do was stare. My first thought wasn't excitement. It wasn't joy. It was disbelief. This couldn't be real. This had to be some scam, the kind where you think you've won, but then the fine print ruins it all. I called the number on the back of the ticket, checked everything twice, 3 times. I walked up and down the driveway in a daze, still unsure. It was real. $5 million. But I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't even smile. I stood there in the dark, holding that little slip of paper like it could burn me. $5 million. After everything. After being stripped of everything that mattered, my name, my kids, my home, and now this. I didn't tell anyone. Not Tarek, not my sister, no one. The moment I spoke up about it, everything would change. People don't look at you the same when they know you've got money. They don't see you, they see a target, a way to gain something. So, I cashed the ticket anonymously, opting for the payout in installments. I kept the whole thing quiet, moving the money into a trust through a lawyer I found online, Renzo Phelps. The guy was loud, aggressive, but sharp as hell. On our first call, he asked, "Let me guess, someone burned you bad, and now you're ready to stop playing, right?" I didn't hesitate. "Exactly," I said. With his help, I started to build a new identity, both financially and personally. We opened new accounts, set up a shell company, and created a small LLC under my name for business purposes. I found a townhouse across town. Nothing fancy, just enough space to breathe without being noticed. I bought some decent clothes that fit right, good shoes, and a mattress that didn't dig into my back like the old one. The doors were locked, the blinds were drawn, and no one knew where I was. For the first time in ages, I felt like I had control again. I got a new phone, new number, and I didn't reach out to Camille. Didn't contact my kids, either. Not yet. I wanted to, God knows I did, but not like this, not as the broken guy sleeping in a garage. I needed them to see me as someone strong, solid, someone who had fought through the fire and come out of it intact. Not a wreck. Not someone who had been burned beyond repair. Renzo, my lawyer, started digging through the mess that had become my life. He found gaps in the restraining order, issues with the custody filing, shoddy work. He told me they thought I was down for the count, that I wouldn't fight back. Lucky for us, he said. Now you've got the resources to push back. I also hired a financial advisor, a quiet woman named Patrice, who never pried beyond what was necessary. She helped me see the difference between wealth and power. You've got the first, she told me. Now let's make sure you get the second, without blowing it. Every move I made was calculated, silent, strategic. I signed up for self-defense classes, not because I thought I'd need them right away, but because I needed to feel strong again. I went back to therapy, this time with someone who specialized in trauma recovery for men. I began writing again, but not the way I had before. This wasn't about pouring out my pain anymore. I was planning my comeback. I listed my goals like battle strategies: get the kids back, clear my name, make Camille answer for everything she'd done. Take back what was mine. I still carried the photo of Ari and Jonas, but now, instead of just whispering, "Survive," I added something else: reclaim, rebuild, rise. I walked differently now. I spoke differently now. Not louder, just more steady. The weight I'd been carrying for the past 6 months hadn't disappeared, but I was stronger. I wasn't crumbling under it anymore. I'd been reshaped. The lottery didn't fix everything. It didn't give me back the moments I lost with my kids, didn't undo the lies Camille spread, but it gave me a tool, a chance. And I wasn't going to waste it. This time, I was going to play smart. No one, especially not Camille, would see me coming. It was a Wednesday when she showed up. I remember because I had just finished a call with Patrice about setting up a trust fund for the kids, and the sun was low, spilling gold light across the front of my townhouse. I was in sweatpants, barefoot, halfway through reheating some leftover stir-fry. Then came the knock, 3 casual raps, like someone dropping by for a favor. I looked through the peephole and froze. It was Camille. Her hair was pinned back the way she always did when she was trying to look soft. And, of all things, she was holding a pie. A damn pie. It was in one of those red glass dishes, Sherry's, if I had to guess. I didn't move. For a second, I actually convinced myself I was hallucinating. But then she shifted her weight, and I saw it, not regret, not fear, strategy. I opened the door slowly. "How did you find me?" I asked. Her smile faltered. "Hi, Marcus." I didn't answer. I just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed. She scanned the porch, glancing around like she was expecting something. I stepped back, taking in the sight of her. "You look good. Need something?" I asked flatly. She hesitated. I came to apologize." I just stared at her, processing her words. "That's why you brought a pie? Guilt bakes, huh?" She had the nerve to look offended. "Can I come in?" "No." Her mouth pressed into a thin line. "Look, I know I hurt you." I was confused. I cut her off, my voice low, sharp. "Stop. You don't get to show up here uninvited and rewrite the past like it was all just some misunderstanding. You lied, Camille. You destroyed me. That wasn't confusion. That was war." Her hands trembled around the pie dish, but she pushed forward. I was scared. I thought I was protecting the kids. Protecting them from what? I shot back, my tone icy. A father who tucked them in every night, who worked 60-hour weeks just to keep the lights on, while you played photographer in yoga pants and avocado toast? She was stunned, her mouth hanging open like I'd slapped her. Maybe she wasn't used to this version of me, the one who didn't flinch, didn't break, didn't crumble. Then, like clockwork, she did what Camille always did when a door started to close, she wedged her foot in it. "I heard you won the lottery," she said, her voice suddenly smooth, like butter over a trap. Word got around. I raised an eyebrow, keeping my cool. "Did it?" She tilted her head, her eyes narrowing. "You're still legally my husband, Marcus." I gave her a slow, deliberate nod. "Technically. Not emotionally, not spiritually, not in any way that counts." She repeated it, almost as if trying to convince herself, but legally. Her eyes lit up, that spark in them like a slot machine hitting 777s. "Which means if you acquired wealth during this separation." I saw it clearly then, all of it. The pie, the soft tone, the way she tried to hold back the tears in her eyes. She hadn't come to apologize or make amends. No, she came for the money. I smiled, but it didn't touch my eyes. "So, this is what this is about. I'm entitled to half," she said, stepping forward like she thought I might invite her in any second. "And I filed the paperwork today. You'll be hearing from Silas," she added, and I couldn't help but laugh, sharp, bitter. It sounded harsher than I meant it. "You're still using him after everything?" She blinked, clearly confused. "What do you mean?" I took a step closer, meeting her eyes. "I mean it's impressive how loyal you are to the lawyer who helped you fake those texts and steal my kids." She went white, and that shift in her face made me pause. Did she know I knew? Or was she just scared I had figured it out? "I'm sorry," she said again, but this time it just rang empty, hollow. "No, you're not sorry," I said, cutting her off. "You're desperate." Her voice wavered, like she might cry. "You think this was easy for me? I had to raise them alone, deal with the judgment, the loneliness." "You chose that," I interrupted. "You picked the route. You burned the map." We stood there, silent, the weight of all the resentment hanging between us. Finally, I stepped back, my voice cold. "Good luck, Camille. Really. But don't ever show up unannounced again." I closed the door on her. She didn't knock again. She just stood there for a moment, pie still clutched in her hands, before walking away. The next day, the court summons arrived, a petition for alimony and a legal claim for half of my lottery winnings, filed retroactively under community property. Renzo let out a laugh when I handed him the court papers. "She really thinks she can play this long game with those amateur moves," he said, shaking his head. "Let her come, let her try." Then, his expression hardened, a glint of understanding in his eyes. She's still dangerous. I nodded, feeling the weight of it. Yes. But now, so are you. That night, I sat in my living room, the light low, the faint scent of the cherry pie still hanging in the air, the one I'd tossed in the trash after Camille left. I grabbed my journal and wrote 2 simple lines, * she thinks it's about the money. She has no idea what's coming *. I paused for a moment, letting those words sink in. When you've been lied to, ripped apart, and dragged through hell, there comes a point where your pain doesn't turn into peace, and it doesn't turn into forgiveness. It turns into purpose. Camille had lit that fire in me, not just because she was chasing money, not just because she had the nerve to show up with a pie, but because she thought I would fold. She thought I was still that broken man. That was her mistake. I handed the court papers to Renzo, who took one look at them and smirked, like he'd been waiting for this move all along. Let her come, he said, tossing the papers onto his desk. She just opened the door. We didn't waste any time after that. That same afternoon, Renzo made the call. It changed everything. There's someone I want you to meet, he said. Simone Drax. Former cop. Private investigator. Zero tolerance for bullshit. I met Simone at a diner downtown. She walked in like she owned the place, jeans, leather jacket, eyes sharp and unreadable. When she sat across from me, it felt like she could see straight through every lie I'd ever told. Marcus Bell, she said, sliding into the booth with a look that could cut right through me. I've heard a lot about you, she said, not even attempting a smile. I'm guessing it's not the flattering kind. I leaned back, trying to keep my voice steady. That's why I'm here. We sat across from each other, the coffee between us cooling as she scribbled notes on a pad. I gave her everything, all the accusations Camille had thrown at me, the texts, the court battles, even that ridiculous pie incident. I told her about Silas Vaughn, the timing of the evidence, the restraining order that never seemed quite right. Simone didn't interrupt, just listened and nodded. When I finished, she closed the notepad with a soft snap and looked me dead in the eye. Give me 2 weeks. I didn't think she needed to say that, though. In just a matter of days, Simone had already begun sending us everything she uncovered. Screenshots, audio clips, metadata dumps. She wasn't just looking for answers, she was pulling up entire layers of lies from the ground. The first bombshell, Camille had been having an affair for 3 years. The man? Silas Vaughn. Yeah, the same one who'd been acting as her lawyer. That hit me like a punch to the gut. But Simone didn't stop there. She kept digging, unearthing deleted texts and photos hidden behind encrypted folders on social media accounts I didn't even know existed. I couldn't believe it. There were pictures of them at hotels, at beach weekends, even at our neighborhood's 4th of July celebration. In one of those photos, Silas was standing just out of frame, while I was grilling hot dogs for the kids. I had no idea. But the real killer? A voice note. It was Camille, talking to her cousin, Deja. The words were crystal clear, her laughter echoing through the recording. I had to do it. Marcus would have taken everything in a normal divorce. This way, I got the house, the kids, and sympathy. It was a necessary evil. I felt the air go still, like the weight of it was pressing down on my chest. I played that recording so many times that the battery on my phone finally gave out. Necessary evil. The words echoed in my head, and every time I heard them, a part of me burned. Simone had also tracked down a series of payments, small, consistent transfers from Camille's joint account with me to a private one she'd opened months before filing for divorce. The recipient? Silas. The descriptions for the transfers ranged from consulting and legal review to my personal favorite, therapy. She'd been paying him to fake a crisis. That's what Simone told me over the phone. This whole thing was orchestrated, fabricated, and guess what? I'm still not done. Renzo sounded almost giddy as he sifted through the files. This is gold, he said, practically salivating over each new discovery. We've got criminal fraud, legal malpractice, perjury, hell, we could charge for emotional damages at this point. But I didn't care about revenge. Not really. What I wanted was justice. I wanted to clear my name, to show Ari and Jonas that their father wasn't the monster Camille had made me out to be. I hadn't walked away from them, I'd been pushed out. Still, every new piece of evidence Simone dug up brought a deep, burning satisfaction. I'd been living under the weight of a narrative I hadn't written, and now, finally, I had proof that it was nothing but fiction. But we weren't done yet. Simone found more deleted messages between Camille and Deja. In one of them, they were laughing about milking Marcus dry and how easy it was to manipulate the system. Camille had even saved drafts of fake messages she never sent, just in case she needed to manufacture more proof. Screenshots of Silas coaching Camille on how to cry on the stand. It was all laid out, right in front of me. I sat across from Renzo in his office, the table covered in printouts, while a whiteboard behind him was filled with names, dates, and arrows connecting everything. "This is your redemption arc," he said, looking over at me. Asterisk, they built their castle on sand. You built your comeback on stone. Asterisk. I leaned back in my chair, lacing my fingers together. Asterisk, what happens next? Asterisk, I asked. Renzo didn't hesitate. Asterisk, we file motions. We go back to court, but this time, we're not on defense. Asterisk. I glanced down at a photo. Simone had printed one of Camille and Silas kissing in a hotel lobby. Camille looked so carefree, smiling, as if none of this had any weight. I traced my finger over the image, the quiet words slipping out of my mouth. Asterisk, it's time she learns what consequences feel like. Asterisk. When I left Renzo's office that day, I had a thumb drive full of evidence and something else, something I hadn't felt in years. It wasn't anger or sadness. It was power. For the first time since all of this started, I wasn't just surviving anymore. I was ready to fight back. Courtrooms always have this strange feeling. They're cold, sterile, but there's a certain kind of heat that fills them, not from the temperature, but from the tension, from the pride, from everything people carry with them. You can feel it in your bones. I walked into that courtroom that morning not as the man Camille had tried to destroy, but as the man who had survived it all. The man with the truth, with proof, with a team. Renzo adjusted his tie beside me, the same way someone prepares for war, because, in a way, that's exactly what this was. On the other side of the room, Camille sat in a navy dress, wearing kitten heels, her face soft and her hair styled perfectly as if she were heading to brunch. Beside her, as usual, was Silas Vaughn. His suit was sharp, his expression smug, as if all the months of deceit we'd uncovered were just a minor inconvenience, not the crumbling empire they'd built. They didn't seem worried at all, which amused me. They should have been terrified. Camille had filed for alimony and a share of the lottery winnings, claiming I came into the money while we were still married. She said she'd sacrificed years of her life for my stability and that she deserved to benefit from what we'd built together. Renzo leaned in as we sat there, whispering, asterisk, let them talk. When it's our turn, we got the whole operation. Asterisk, the judge entered, all stern and no nonsense. I watched Camille, her eyes darting between the people in the room. When she glanced at Silas, I saw that same flicker of sympathy she always carried for him. But when her gaze met mine, it was pure neutrality. That was fine. All we needed was a clean shot. Camille went first. She took the stand, tissue already clutched in her hand, her voice trembling just enough to seem convincing. She painted a picture of a man who'd abandoned his family, struck it rich, and then left them behind. She claimed she couldn't afford proper schooling for the kids, said I'd cut off all communication and compassion. She even wept, saying she'd had to sell her jewelry just to buy groceries. I almost laughed, but I caught myself. Renzo had warned me, don't react, let her perform. Then it was Silas's turn. He took over with that polished, practiced tone of his, sharp suit, and all. He started talking about community assets, financial entitlement, and emotional labor. He referenced case law, obscure precedents, and when he was finished, Camille dabbed her eyes dramatically, as if she'd just survived a war zone. Then it was our turn. Renzo didn't stride to the front the way they did. He moved with quiet confidence, ready to take them apart piece by piece. Renzo walked in like it was just another day, calm, measured, almost casual. He introduced me to the room, then, with the precision of someone who'd been planning this for weeks, started tearing Camille's story apart, piece by piece. He began with the timeline, pointing out the supposed sacrifices, the emotional labor she'd claimed. He laid out spreadsheets, transaction histories, and income gaps. He showed how, for most of our marriage, I had been the only one bringing in a paycheck, while Camille hadn't worked more than 10 hours a week since Jonas was born. Then he moved on to the photos. Your Honor, he said, lifting the first printout. This is Camille Bell on a weekend getaway with Silas Vaughn. He went through the details, location, time-stamped hotel receipts charged to a private joint account they'd opened 6 months before filing for divorce. He showed how money had been moved from Camille's primary checking account into that private one, with bi-weekly transfers. Marcus Bell never had access to this, Renzo added, his tone almost too calm, too sure of himself. Camille stiffened at the mention of the account, and I noticed Silas adjust his tie, but I could see his jaw tightening. He was starting to crack. Renzo wasn't done. He hit play on a voice recording, the one where Camille called what she'd done a necessary evil. Then the one where she was laughing with Deja about how they were going to ruin me to get a free ride. The room shifted. It wasn't just the weight of the evidence, it was the way everyone in that room felt the truth starting to sink in. Then Simone stepped up. She was dressed in a dark blazer, her stance clear and no nonsense. She went through how she'd recovered deleted data, outlined the affair's timeline, and explained how Camille and Silas had meticulously crafted this lie to make it look like I'd been unfaithful. When she played the voice clip of Camille and Deja, I could feel the air change again. The truth was out there now. And there was no taking it back. I heard Camille whispering to Silas, her voice low but clear enough to reach me. "We'll drag him through this for a year, then settle. I just want the money, and I want him humiliated." I didn't have to look at her. The entire courtroom was already focused on her. The judge hadn't said much during the whole presentation, but I could see her posture shift. Her pen stopped moving, and her eyes narrowed, zeroing in on Silas, like she'd just caught a whiff of something foul. Renzo didn't need to raise his voice or make a scene. He just spoke the truth, breaking it down piece by piece, layer by layer, until there was no version of Camille's story that could hold up. By the end of the day, her tissues were gone. Her hands, once trembling, were now clenched into fists, and the tears she'd been feigning were nowhere to be found. For the first time since this whole mess started, Silas didn't have that smug look on his face. We wrapped up the day in silence. The room was still, the air heavy. The judge called an emergency recess, saying she needed time to go over the new evidence. Her voice was sharp, clipped, but there was no mistaking the shift in the atmosphere. Something had changed. Outside the courthouse, I stood on the steps with Renzo and Simone. There were no reporters, no flashing cameras, but honestly, I didn't need that kind of attention. I just needed to know things were moving in the right direction. Renzo looked over at me and said dryly, "I think that went well." Simone took a drag from her cigarette, exhaling slowly, then added, "She's cornered now. She might try to cry again next time, but it won't matter." I glanced up at the sky. Clouds were thick, but the sunlight was trying to break through. "She spent a year trying to destroy me," I muttered. "Now she'll learn what it feels like to be exposed." Renzo nodded, his eyes focused. "And this is just the beginning." I thought the last hearing would be the turning point, the moment Camille's lies would finally crumble under the weight of the truth. But Renzo had a different approach. "You don't just win cases like this, Marcus," he said. "You dismantle them, piece by piece, until there's nothing left to argue with." When Renzo told me we were calling one more witness, I didn't even hesitate. I just watched him make the call that would turn everything upside down. The next day in court, things felt different. Camille sat rigid in her seat, her jaw clenched tight. No more tears. No more tissues. She was as cold as stone. Silas? He didn't look at me, didn't say a word to anyone. That smirk of his was gone, replaced with something far sharper, almost paranoid. The judge sat straighter than usual, her pen held between her fingers, lips pressed thin, like she was holding her breath. The air in the room felt razor-sharp, like someone was about to cut through the tension. Renzo stood up and said, "Your Honor, the defense would like to submit testimony from a new witness via a sworn deposition." I saw Camille jerk toward us, her eyes wide. Silas turned a deep shade of red. "The court accepts the submission," the judge said, her voice cautious. "Proceed." Renzo hit play on a small speaker, and suddenly, Judge Eldridge's voice filled the room. It was steady, authoritative. After reviewing the initial restraining order filed by Camille Bell, I noted procedural inconsistencies, namely the absence of police reports, the lack of witness corroboration, and an abnormal approval turnaround. The room went completely silent. But I could feel the shift, like a tremor moving through the floor beneath me. This wasn't just about false accusations anymore. It was about something much darker, a carefully orchestrated plan. Someone in Camille's corner had helped her manipulate the system, and now that truth was out in the open. Judge Eldridge's voice filled the room again, steady and deliberate. Additionally, the emergency custody decision was made without the proper evaluation. There was no home visit, no psychological assessment of the father. Based on these findings, I believe the order was issued under irregular, possibly unethical circumstances. She paused the playback, her eyes narrowing. I could feel the weight of what she was implying, the room growing colder. Is the implication that the original order was not just flawed, but potentially fraudulent? The judge asked, looking up. Without a moment's hesitation, Renzo answered, "Yes, Your Honor. And we're prepared to submit the digital forensic report." Silas's face went pale as he shot to his feet, his voice strained with panic. "Objection. This is conjecture. We weren't given notice of this witness." The judge didn't even flinch. "You'll have time to respond, Mr. Vaughn. Sit down." I watched Silas sink back into his seat, his face a mask of frustration. Camille leaned in, whispering fiercely in his ear, but he didn't respond. The air in the room was thick, suffocating. Then Renzo stood again, and I knew it was coming. He was far from done. "Now, Your Honor," Renzo said, his voice calm but commanding, "one final piece of evidence." He tapped the screen, and a new audio file began to play. The quality wasn't perfect, but the voices were unmistakable. I recognized them immediately. Camille and Silas, their voices captured in a coffee shop, a conversation Simone had managed to record. She'd planted a microphone on the table by pretending to forget her purse, making sure they wouldn't notice. Camille's voice was sharp, almost cold, as she spoke clearly, "We'll drag him for a year, then settle. I just want the money and I want him humiliated." Silas's response came through, frustrated, almost annoyed, but I could hardly focus on his words. My mind was spinning. This wasn't just a game anymore. This was something far darker. "You're pushing too far. If this comes out, it won't," Camille snapped, her voice sharp, desperate. "He doesn't have the money to fight back." I glanced over at the judge. She was stone-faced, but her fingers drummed a slow, rhythmic beat on the bench. Renzo didn't flinch. He just clicked the file closed and let the heavy silence settle in the room. When the judge finally spoke, her tone was colder than I expected. "We're going to take a recess. This court will reconvene tomorrow for closing remarks and a final decision." She stood up, her movements brisk, and walked out without waiting for anyone else to move. Camille turned in her seat to look at me. The defiance had drained from her face, replaced with something more fragile. She was rattled, her lips parted as though she might speak. But I didn't give her the chance. I stood and left the room, my footsteps echoing in the quiet hallway. Outside, the sky was thick with storm clouds, the wind picking up. I walked in silence with Renzo and Simone to the courthouse steps. My mind was buzzing, heavy with what had just happened. "She's finished," Simone said flatly, like she was already writing her off. "She'll try to spin it," Renzo added, "play the victim again. But it won't work this time." I nodded, but I didn't trust my voice. My mind was elsewhere, caught in a whirlwind of thoughts. What if I hadn't bought that lottery ticket? What if I'd never met Renzo, never found Simone's help? Would I still be stuck in that garage, punching the air in the dark, hoping someone, anyone, would believe me? That night, I sat alone in my living room. No music, no distractions, just the weight of everything pressing in. I pulled out an old journal, the one filled with scribbled anger, tear-streaked pages, unanswered prayers, and turned to a blank one. I needed something to anchor me, something that could help me make sense of all this. I wrote one line, "This is what the truth sounds like," and when it finally hit me, I closed the journal, leaned back, and let myself breathe. Tomorrow would be the endgame, the final blow. But tonight, for the first time in what felt like forever, I felt a weight lifting. I wasn't free yet, but I could feel it coming. The next morning, the courthouse felt different. The air was still, like the building itself knew the game had changed. There were no whispers, no chatter, no palpable tension hanging in the air. Just a heavy silence, the kind you feel when everything that's needed has been said, and now, it's just a matter of waiting for the consequences to unfold. Camille walked in alone this time. No Silas by her side. Her steps were slower, dragging, and her blouse hung a bit too loose at the sleeves, like she either hadn't slept or just didn't care anymore. The woman who used to command attention with a sly smirk and a perfectly timed tear now looked smaller, somehow. Like the mask she'd worn so well was starting to choke her. I didn't smile. I didn't gloat. I just sat there, my hands steady and clasped in front of me, waiting. Then the judge entered, and the room quieted. There were no pleasantries, no drawn-out speeches. She went straight to it. In light of the newly submitted evidence, including audio recordings, sworn depositions, and corroborated digital records, the court has found multiple instances of fraud, perjury, and deliberate manipulation of legal processes initiated by Mrs. Camille Bell. Her words hit the air like thunder rolling over the horizon, slow but inevitable. I didn't need to hear more. The truth had already been spoken. Camille didn't flinch. She just sat there, motionless, her eyes fixed straight ahead as though she'd already detached from what was happening around her. When the judge spoke, the words cut through the silence like a sharp knife. The request for alimony is denied. The claim to shared lottery winnings is dismissed with prejudice. Furthermore, Mrs. Bell is ordered to pay the respondents full legal fees, in addition to a punitive fine for filing fraudulent motions in family court. The judge paused, then turned her gaze directly to Camille. "You abused this court's trust. You crafted a narrative not only to destroy your ex-husband's reputation, but to profit from his downfall. That is not just unethical, it's criminal. You're fortunate that the respondent has chosen not to pursue charges at this time." For the first time, Camille's eyes flicked toward me, just a fleeting look, almost like a silent plea. But I didn't look away. I didn't give her the satisfaction. The judge continued, her voice firm. "As for the matter of custody, given the manipulation, the fabricated claims of emotional neglect, and the recent findings of false evidence used to obtain the initial order, this court is reversing the prior custody ruling. Full legal and physical custody of Ari and Jonas Bell is hereby granted to Mr. Marcus Bell. My breath caught in my chest, but I didn't move. The words settled in, but I couldn't fully grasp them in that moment. Full custody. My kids. Home. The judge's voice was clear. Mrs. Bell is granted supervised visitation, contingent upon her enrollment and completion of a 12-week parenting and psychological rehabilitation program. Until that requirement is met, visitation will remain at the court's discretion. Renzo's hand landed on my shoulder, firm and steady, grounding me. You did it, he whispered, his voice low but full of meaning. Camille rose from her seat. There were no tears, no dramatic outbursts, nothing. She just grabbed her bag and walked out of the courtroom, her steps slow, but still purposeful, as though her body knew the act of walking with confidence, but her mind finally understood it was all over. No more lies, no more pretending, no more hiding behind a polished lawyer's words. She was alone now. Silas had been disbarred the same week. That audio Simone had captured, combined with the payment trail and the undeniable breach of ethics, it was more than enough. The Bar Association didn't even try to fight it. They slapped him with a suspension within 48 hours, followed by a permanent revocation. He didn't even bother contesting it. I heard he'd already cleared out his office. As for Camille, she lost more than just the case. The house was sold within a month to cover the fines and legal costs. She ended up in a small 2-bedroom apartment on the outskirts of town. Friends stopped calling. Family started to pull away. The narrative she'd tried to spin, her as the victim, had shattered, and now, no one wanted to get too close to the fallout. I didn't throw a party or make a big show of it. I didn't post anything on social media. But when I finally had the kids back, really back, it felt like the world had shifted. That first night, I made tacos, just like we used to, and for the first time in a long time, it felt like things might finally be right again. Ari helped me chop the lettuce, and Jonas carefully set the table, making sure to place a napkin at every seat. When we finally sat down, the atmosphere was quiet, awkward, uncertain. Then, Jonas looked up at me and asked, "Do we have to go back tomorrow?" I shook my head, giving him a small smile. "No, buddy. You're home now." Ari stared at me for a moment, her eyes searching, and then she spoke, her voice small. "Mom said you didn't want us." I felt a lump form in my throat, but I kept my voice steady. "I always wanted you," I said softly. "I just couldn't get to you. But I never stopped trying." The table fell into silence after that, but it wasn't the same as before. It wasn't filled with fear or confusion. It was different, quiet, but the kind of silence that felt like healing, like the first steps of trust being rebuilt, unsure but real. Over the next few weeks, we rebuilt our routine, piece by piece. Therapy, game nights, mornings together. They didn't mention Camille much, and I didn't press them. I figured they'd ask when they were ready. Then the final paperwork came through. Full custody. The case was officially closed. That evening, I sat on the porch, watching the sun sink low over the lake. I pulled the old family photo from my wallet, the one taken before everything fell apart. I stared at it for a long moment, then pulled out a new one, me, Ari, and Jonas by the water, all of us laughing. I slid the old photo behind the new one, because the past had its place, but this was the future. Healing isn't loud. It doesn't announce itself with fanfare or waves crashing against the shore. It comes quietly, like the first light of morning creeping through the curtains, like laughter that catches you by surprise when you weren't even looking for it. That's how it all started for me, for Ari, and for Jonas. No grand speeches or big moments, just small, quiet actions that slowly began to piece things together. We found a small house by the lake. Nothing extravagant, just simple and peaceful. The kind of place where the breeze would hum through the trees, and you could hear frogs singing as the sun set. The kids each got their own rooms again, and I let them paint their walls however they wanted. Jonas went with dinosaurs. Ari chose constellations, and the walls glowed at night with stars. I let them pick out new furniture, new bedding, new lamps, everything was fresh. I wanted them to feel like this wasn't some stranger's house they were walking into, but a place they could finally call home. The first few weeks, though, were tough. I won't sugarcoat it. They were angry, especially Ari. She didn't raise her voice much, she just pulled away. Eyes that wouldn't meet mine, shoulders hunched, walls up. She didn't trust me yet, and I couldn't blame her. Jonas, on the other hand, was more confused than anything. He followed Ari's lead, watching me like he was waiting for the other shoe to drop. But I didn't push. I made sure to wake them up for school, pack their lunches, cook breakfast, even if most of it went untouched in the beginning. I just showed up every day, steady, with quiet hands and open arms. After everything that had happened, I knew consistency was the only thing that might make a difference. Therapy helped, too. We each had our individual sessions, then we started family counseling. Ari barely said a word during the first couple of sessions. But then, one day, out of the blue, she looked at the therapist and asked, "Why did my mom lie?" No one had prepared Ari for that moment. She just asked it, out of nowhere. I remember looking at her, stunned, and seeing something I hadn't seen in a long time, curiosity, instead of that distant, closed-off look she'd worn for months. That was the first real sign that she was starting to come back to me. Taco nights became a thing again. We settled back into it like we'd never stopped. Jonas picked up his markers and started drawing again, his little comics with silly characters. One of them was a superhero dad, complete with a cape and a lawnmower. He handed it to me one evening, his face all shy and proud. I took it from him, and that Friday night, I stuck it up on the fridge like it was a masterpiece. Saturdays became our walking days. Sometimes we'd head to the lake, other times just around the block. I didn't push for conversations. I let the quiet between us settle and breathe. Over time, the kids began to fill that silence. They'd point out birds, tell me about school, ask me random questions about anything and everything, questions that had nothing to do with the past, nothing to do with court or the mess we'd been through, just simple, everyday kid stuff. Camille tried to fight it once, sent in a request to change the visitation terms. But the court shot it down without a second thought. Her therapy and parenting classes weren't even halfway through, and honestly, the kids didn't bring her up much. When they did, I gave them the truth, but I kept it gentle. "Your mom's working on herself," I'd say. "When she's ready and the court says it's safe, you'll be able to talk to her, if that's what you want." I never spoke ill of her to them. That was a line I wasn't going to cross. I wouldn't become the villain in their story, not after everything. I wasn't going to twist their memories or use their love as a weapon. They deserved the truth, but I knew they needed space to figure it out on their own, in their own time. As for me, I used a chunk of the lottery money to do something that gave my life a sense of meaning again. I started the Clean Slate Foundation, a non-profit dedicated to helping fathers who'd been wrongfully pushed out of their children's lives. Especially the ones who didn't have the resources to fight back. I assembled a team of advocates, counselors, and legal experts. We took on cases for free, ran workshops, shared resources, and fought for men who'd been silenced and stigmatized. It gave me a new sense of purpose, something I hadn't had in a long time. It wasn't about getting revenge or seeking justice anymore. It was about making sure no one else had to go through what I did, not without the support of a good lawyer or a team like Renzo's or Simone's. I stayed away from social media, never made a spectacle out of my story. The people who needed to know, knew. The ones who mattered were under my roof, safe and sound, sleeping in their beds and waking up to pancakes on Sunday mornings. That was enough for me. Some nights, after the kids had gone to bed, I'd sit by the lake with a cup of coffee, just listening to the water lap against the shore. It gave my mind a chance to rest. I thought about Camille sometimes, but not with anger. More with a kind of detachment. She made her choices. She started the fire that burned everything down, and then she tried to crawl out of the wreckage and take what she hadn't earned. But I didn't have to carry that burden anymore. That weight was gone. One night, I found the old photo tucked at the back of my wallet, the one from before everything went wrong, when I still believed everything was fine, permanent. I stared at it for a while, memories flooding back. Then I pulled out the new one, me and the kids, laughing by the lake, our hair a mess, real smiles on our faces. I taped the new photo over the old one, not to erase the past, but to make peace with it. 12 years may not have meant anything to Camille, but to me, those years were why I fought so hard to rebuild everything. And now it was real.